My parents gave my sister $90,000 for a house while I was left to drown in debt. Then she drove past my lavender farm and screamed, "You're doing what?" Emily, my elder sister, enjoyed the sunshine, while I learned to navigate with whatever low light crept through. Mom and Dad never bothered to hide their tastes. Emily was 8 months old when she first walked. I wandered around until 13 months, which seemed to have secured my fate as the disappointing child before I could even form sentences. Every family has dynamics, but ours seemed set in stone. Emily made the honor roll throughout elementary school. I brought home primarily B's with the rare A-, prompting Dad to question what was wrong with me at each parent-teacher meeting. She played varsity volleyball, and her father never missed a game, taping every serve and spike. I joined the art club, and Mom often neglected to pick me up, so Mrs. Harris, our advisor, began driving me home herself. The pattern repeated at each milestone. Emily received a vehicle for her 16th birthday. I drove the Honda Civic, which Dad spent 3 weekends polishing until it sparkled. When my 16th birthday came around, they treated me to supper at Applebee's and gave me a $60 gift card. Mom told me I should be pleased they remembered everything, given how busy they were with Emily's college applications. College created another barrier between us. Emily was accepted into Stanford on a partial academic scholarship. My parents paid the rest, about $35,000 every year, without blinking. They hosted a graduation celebration for her before she went, inviting everyone from our church and Dad's office. I observed from the kitchen, replenishing chip bowls, while family members I hardly knew praised my parents on producing such a successful girl. When my chance came 2 years later, I had been admitted to a public institution located 2.5 hours away. The tuition was half of Emily's. I sat down with my folks for supper, acceptance letter in hand, delighted despite years of educating myself not to expect too much. Dad scarcely glanced up from his pot roast. "We're not paying for that," he added, slicing his steak with surgical accuracy. The room leaned slightly. "What do you mean? You paid for Emily." Mom jumped in, her voice turning on that sugary, rational tone she employed when giving bad news. "Emily earned her spot at a prestigious university. You're going to a state school. That's something people do when they're not serious about education." "It's still college," I said, my voice cracking like I was 13 again. Dad finally glanced at me, and I wished he had not. His look conveyed nothing but disappointment. Familiar as my own reflection. "Emily is going places. She's got potential. You've never applied yourself to anything. We're not throwing money away on someone who's just going to waste it." The words fell like physical blows. "You think I'm going to waste it?" "We think you should figure out your life on your own," Mom added, cleaning plates as if the conversation had ended. "Emily worked hard. You coast. There's a difference. I took out student debts. All of them. Every dollar of that schooling was funded at 7.2% interest, and I'm still paying it off now. I worked 2 jobs in college, one at the university library and the other serving tables at a cafe that smelled like burnt coffee and crushed hopes. My grades decreased since tiredness is an unsuitable study companion, yet I graduated. My family was not well represented during the ceremony. Emily was too preoccupied with her new marketing job in San Francisco, and my parents felt the travel was too lengthy for a state school graduation. What they didn't realize was that I stopped expecting them to show up well before graduation day. The true breaking point had arrived during my sophomore year, when I had pneumonia while working double shifts in the cold without a decent coat. I couldn't afford to miss work, so I persevered until I fell during my library shift. My roommate Rachel discovered me on the floor between the stacks, with a fever so high that I was having hallucinations of the Dewey Decimal System coming to life. She transported me to urgent care, paid a copay I did not have, and allowed me stay with her family throughout Thanksgiving break to heal. I contacted my parents from her mother's guest room, barely above a whisper, hoping that a terrible sickness would arouse some parental instincts. Dad responded on the 4th ring. "What is it?" "We're about to sit down for dinner. I've been in urgent care. I have pneumonia. The doctor says I need to rest for at least a week, but I'll lose both jobs if I don't work." Silence extended over the line. "Well, that's what happens when you overextend yourself. You need to learn better time management. There is no offer to aid with medical expenditures. There was no suggestion that they give money so I could take a week off work. Just criticism presented in a monotone tone that said my situation was boring him." Mom picked up the phone, her voice dripping with fake worry. "Are you taking your vitamins? I told you to take vitamins. This wouldn't have happened if you'd listened to me." I hung up while she was still speaking. Rachel's mother, Mrs. Linda Harris, the same woman who eventually became my financial advisor, appeared on my door 10 minutes later, bringing hot soup and a $550 check. "My daughter tells me you're working yourself sick," she added as she settled into the chair beside my bed. "This isn't a loan. Consider it an investment in your future. Take the week off. Heal. Your jobs will still be there, and if they're not, better jobs will come." I sobbed so hard that I almost vomited. That's when I realized that family wasn't about blood. It was about who turned up when you needed them. My parents' mistreatment had deeper roots than I had realized for years. During my junior year, I began visiting a counselor at the school health center, a wonderful woman called Dr. Evans who specialized in family trauma. She asked me to sketch up my childhood, highlighting times when I felt genuinely noticed by my parents. The exercise lasted 15 minutes. When I was 7, I created 3 moments and placed second in a school art competition. When I was 12, Dad spent the whole of the ceremony chatting to Emily's volleyball coach and cooking supper for the family because Mom was unwell, even though she judged my spaghetti sauce throughout the meal. And when I was 15, I scored high enough on the PSAT to be eligible for a scholarship program, despite Dad's insistence that the exam was irrelevant. 3 times in 18 years, they acknowledged my presence with something other than disappointment. "What do you notice about these memories?" Dr. Evans said softly. "That even the good ones have qualifiers. Even when I accomplished something well, it was not nearly enough." She nodded slowly. "How does this make you feel about your forthcoming graduation?" "It's as if I'm already bracing myself for their lack of interest." Dr. Evans helped me develop what she referred to as protective expectations. Instead of anticipating for my family to arrive and being disappointed when they didn't, I planned for their absence. I invited Rachel and her family, I invited Mrs. Harris. I invited my favorite professor, Dr. Martin, who had helped me with my senior thesis. I formed my own cheering section out of folks who were really invested in my accomplishment. When graduation day arrived and my parents did not appear, I felt the agony. You can't entirely protect yourself from that type of rejection, but I didn't break down. Rachel's entire family donned shirts with my name on them. Mrs. Harris sent flowers. Dr. Martin took me out to dinner later and informed me that she had given me a reference letter for whatever job I wanted to apply for. "You're going to do remarkable things," she told me over dessert. "Not because of your family, but despite them. That kind of resilience is rare." I wanted to trust her, but the job market had different ideas. I worked in a variety of positions after graduation. Graphic design for a tiny company that dissolved after 8 months. Administrative employment in a dentist's office, where the dentist's wife chose to take my place. Freelance employment that paid irregularly and had me checking my bank account with growing dread. I lived in a studio apartment with strange stains on the ceiling and neighbors who yelled at each other in 3 languages. The freelancing taught me more than any official schooling ever could, but not in the ways that anybody prepares for. When clients lowballed me, I learned to negotiate fees without giving in. I learned to look for red flags in project titles, such as exposure and portfolio piece, which implied we would not pay you. I learned to invoice quickly and follow up tirelessly since creative work was the first thing customers felt they could forgo paying for when finances constricted. But primarily, I discovered that I was capable of enduring situations that should have shattered me. There was a month when my laptop died and I couldn't afford repairs. So I performed all of my work on my phone, drawing logos with my thumbs as my eyes moistened from strain. There was the week I had food illness and missed 3 deadlines, losing 2 regular clients who didn't want to hear justifications. There was the full winter when my studio apartment's heater broke and my landlord took 6 weeks to repair it. So I worked bundled in every item of clothes I possessed, my fingers scarcely able to move my mouse. Throughout it all, my family's remarks created a grim soundtrack. At the few family occasions I still attended, Dad would inquire about my small hobby projects, while Emily discussed her business development. Mom would advise me to look into finding a real career with benefits, as if I hadn't applied for hundreds of opportunities only to lose them to people with family connections, or the financial resources to take unpaid internships. The comparison felt deliberate and precise. When Emily mentioned her Christmas bonus, Dad would glow with delight. When I mentioned getting a 3-month contract, Mom would ask when I planned to start serious about my profession. The goalposts changed repeatedly, always just out of reach. What they never realized was that Emily's achievement had been funded from the beginning. Her Stanford degree provided opportunities that my state school qualifications did not. Her debt-free graduation allowed her to pursue an unpaid internship at a top business while I was trying to make loan payments. Her resume displayed stability because she could afford to be picky about jobs, but mine demonstrated job hopping since I accepted whatever paid the bills. We were not in the same race. She had begun at the 50-yard line while I was still looking for the track. But something changed in me over those grueling freelance years. Perhaps it was because I struck rock bottom so frequently that I became accustomed to the look. Perhaps it was recognizing that my parents' acceptance would not come regardless of what I accomplished. Perhaps it was just tiredness that had finally crystallized into rage. I stopped apologizing for my situation. I stopped downplaying my accomplishments to make people comfortable. When clients sought to negotiate lower rates, I stood strong or went away. When family members made snarky remarks, I responded with silence rather than self-deprecating quips. When people inquired what I did for work, I simply responded, "I'm a designer," without the qualification of freelance. The confidence was made up of 3 parts: performance, fake it until you make it, and actual progress. But it worked. Better clients started contacting me. Projects became larger and more expensive. I established a reputation for dependability and great work, which resulted in recommendations and repeat business. Then came the family supper, which ended whatever remained of our friendship. Every family meal became an exercise in humiliation. Emily would discuss her job path, her 401k, and her boyfriend David, who worked in technology and had promising future prospects. My parents hung on every word, asking clarifying questions and gloating to their friends. When the talk moved to me, Dad would ask whether I had found real job yet, and Mom would recommend that I consider returning to school for something more practical. The final straw occurred on a Tuesday evening. I had driven 4 hours to see them for dinner, something I did on a weekly basis despite every instinct screaming to stop. Emily video phoned midway through the lunch, her face beaming with joy. She and David were purchasing a home. "We found the perfect place in Marin County," she said via her phone screen. 3 bedrooms, gorgeous kitchen, close to good schools for when we have kids, but we're just slightly short on the down payment. I saw my father's face soften into a loving expression, one I'd spent 26 years striving to win. "How much do you need, sweetheart?" $90,000 would make it comfortable. We could do it without it, but it would stretch us thin. Mom and Dad had one of those quiet chats when complete decisions are made within eye contact. Dad nodded. "Consider it done," he said. "We'll wire it tomorrow." My fork clattered on the plate. "You're giving her $90,000? We're investing in her future." Mom corrected as though word choice altered the mathematics of preference. Something within me cracked. Perhaps they finally broke free. I couldn't obtain $30,000 for college, but she did get $90,000 for a house. Dad's expression tightened. Emily has proven herself. She's responsible. She's made something of her life. And I haven't? The question came out smaller than I had anticipated. Dad replied, "Look at yourself." And his tone was so contemptuous that I recoiled. "You're 26 years old, working freelance jobs, living in that terrible apartment. You've accomplished nothing. Emily is settling down, building equity, making smart choices. You are this family's failure, and we are not going to finance it anymore." The hush that ensued might have swallowed worlds. Mom did not contradict him. Emily's expression on the phone screen indicated discomfort but not dissent. Nobody came to my defense or eased the impact. Despite feeling as if my entire foundation had fallen, I stood up, legs still solid. "Okay, sit down. We're not done with dinner," my mother remarked. "Yeah, we are." I walked out of the home without looking back, even when Mom told me I was being theatrical. The trip home was a flurry of tears, wrath, and something other, something harsher. Determination perhaps, or perhaps the last death of hope. I stopped phoning, messaging, and attending family meals and holiday celebrations. My phone would periodically light up with messages from Mom wondering whether I was still sulking and Dad insisting that I mature and stop punishing everyone with my attitude. Emily sent a few half-hearted messages on the importance of family and forgiveness as a source of strength. I removed them all. The first several months of no touch felt like withdrawal from a substance I never intended to get hooked to. Every Sunday evening my finger hovered above Mom's contact. Years of mandatory check-in calls have built up muscle memory. Holidays loomed as emotional hazards. Thanksgiving arrived, and I spent it alone in my apartment, eating takeaway Thai and watching movies, feeling both liberated and heartbroken. Christmas was terrible. I awoke to 17 missed calls and a voicemail from Mom whose tone shifted from pleasant to accusing as the conversation went. "I don't understand why you're doing this to us. We're your family. This is abuse. What you're doing. Your father has been so stressed he's had to increase his blood pressure medication. Emily cries about you constantly. When are you going to stop being selfish and come home?" The trickery was so obvious that I nearly laughed. Almost. Instead, I kept the message as evidence of their efforts and banned her phone number. Then I drove to Mrs. Harris's house, where she had invited me for dinner weeks before, knowing that I'd need a place to go. Her family greeted me as if I had always belonged there. Rachel's younger brother showed me how to play the new video game he had acquired. Her grandma showed me images from Taiwan and told me stories of how she immigrated to America with nothing but resolve. Mrs. Harris's husband Robert shown real interest in my freelancing business and linked me with a friend in need of design skills. This is what family should feel like, I told Rachel later, as I helped with the dishes while the rest of the family played board games in the living room. This is what family feels like, she clarified. Your family is just broken. That's on them, not you. The clarity of that remark, that their dysfunction was their fault, not mine, helped something settle in my chest. I'd spent so long trying to figure out what was wrong with me that I'd never considered perhaps the problem was them all along. However, breaking communication did not mean I stopped thinking about them. Every accomplishment brought up memories of my father's displeasure. Every milestone came with my mother's condemnation. I would get a wonderful customer and instantly thought, Dad would say, this is still just freelance. I'd save a lot of money, and then hear Mom's voice questioning why I wasn't saving more. Dr. Evans, whom I had resumed seeing following the family dinner outburst, referred to them as intrusive thoughts. Your parents' voices have become your internal monologue, she said at one session. Part of healing is separating your actual thoughts from their implanted criticisms. We worked on it in cognitive behavioral therapy, detecting when I was catastrophizing or expecting failure based on their previous scripts. She asked me to write down every bad idea and then source it. Was this what I truly thought, or was I channeling my father? Did I truly believe I was failing, or was I just echoing my mother's assessments? The experiment indicated how much mental real estate they still had. Even in their absence, they dominated my psychological environment. So I started remodeling it too. For each critical notion, I made myself identify 3 objective facts. You're going to fail. Change to, I've completed 15 projects successfully this year. Clients have given positive reviews and my income has increased 40%. You're not good enough. Change to, 3 different clients have referred me to others. My portfolio has work I'm genuinely proud of, and I'm supporting myself entirely. Slowly, gradually, I began to remove them from my mind. Instead, I worked. God, did I work. The rush became fuel, better than coffee and more lasting than sleep. I took on every freelancing job I could find, establishing a portfolio as my eyes burned from screen time and my back hurt from hunching over my laptop. I took online courses in user experience design, motion graphics, and brand development. I learned every skill that could be monetized. 6 months after I left their house, a mid-sized computer business employed me full-time as a senior designer. The compensation made me blink 3 times when reading the offer letter. I accepted it right away, and then contacted a financial advisor through my new company's benefits package. I need to invest aggressively, I informed her. Linda, a woman with efficient pantsuits and nice eyes. I have no safety net, no family money. Everything I build must come from me. Linda asked no questions regarding family. Instead, she inquired about goals, risk tolerance and timing. We created a plan. I maxed up my 401k contributions. I registered a Roth IRA, set up a brokerage account, and learnt the distinction between index funds and individual equities. Each paycheck was distributed with military precision. Living costs, loans and investments. I moved into a nicer apartment, with no stains on the ceiling and friendly neighbors in the halls. Nothing spectacular, but it's mine in a way the studio never was. I purchased furniture that did not originate from Facebook Marketplace. I learned to prepare more than just ramen and scrambled eggs. I built a life that did not include waiting for my parents to acknowledge me. The new flat became my laboratory for discovering who I was without their influence. I painted the walls in colors that I loved. Deep teal in the bedroom, warm terracotta in the living area, and don't worry about their approval. I hung my own artwork, which wasn't good enough to show my family but that I had always admired. I bought plants and managed to keep the majority of them alive, which seemed like a larger accomplishment than it actually was. I also started agreeing to things that worried me. Rachel invited me to a rock climbing gym, and instead of rejecting since I was never athletic enough to catch Dad's eye, I went. It turned out I was really good at it, and the problem-solving component attracted to the same portion of my brain that enjoyed design. I joined a weekly climbing club and made pals who had no idea about my familial background. One of those pals, David, a software engineer, different David, the world has a sense of humor, remarked that his firm was looking for designers. I'd been afraid to apply to IT businesses, figuring they only wanted people with computer science degrees or prominent design school qualifications, but David persuaded me to apply. The best designer on our team dropped out of community college, he commented as we played against each other. Companies care about your portfolio, not your pedigree. Well, the good companies do. I spent 2 weeks upgrading my portfolio, picking my best work, and producing case studies to justify my design selections. The application procedure was tedious. 4 interviews, 1 design challenge, and a presentation to their creative team. But when the offer arrived, the wage figure made me reread the email 3 times to ensure I wasn't hallucinating. It was more than double what I'd been earning from freelance work, with benefits and equity, and a team that seemed to see design as a fundamental talent rather than a cosmetic afterthought. I accepted instantly and sat in my apartment, looking at the offer letter, until Rachel came over and demanded we celebrate. We proceeded to a lovely restaurant that I had usually passed by, figuring it was not for people like me, and ordered champagne. To you, Rachel said, lifting her glass. For being the most determined person I've ever met. To being too stubborn to fail, I responded. No, she said firmly. To being smart and talented and refusing to let anyone convince you otherwise. I sobbed into my champagne, which was probably not appropriate etiquette, but the relief seemed essential. This employment proved that I had been right all along. My parents were mistaken. Emily's success did not always imply superiority. It was an advantage, but I had managed to achieve equal achievement without it. The vindication tasted better than the pricey champagne. Starting at the IT business felt like entering another universe. Everyone had monitors with the right color calibration. The coffee tasted nice. People genuinely honored deadlines and did not demand free changes. My boss, Megan, a lady with 20 years of experience in technology design, regarded my comments as if they were important. You've got good instincts, she informed me after the first month. Rough around the edges in terms of working with developers, but that's just communication style. Your actual design thinking is solid. I learned everything I could. How to present to CEOs, conduct user research sessions, argue for design decisions without offending engineers, and negotiate organizational politics without jeopardizing my beliefs. Megan guided me through the entire process, introducing me to other senior designers and encouraging me to take on challenging projects. The imposter syndrome was persistent at first. I'd sit in meetings with folks with master's degrees from Carnegie Mellon or Stanford who had previously worked at Google or Apple and felt like a phony. But gradually I recognized that my perspective was significant precisely because it was unique. I'd achieved success from nothing, so I understood restrictions in ways that privileged designers did not. When we were developing a budget monitoring function, I challenged the team's premise that everyone had savings accounts and investment portfolios. Not everyone has financial cushions, I stated during a design review. Some people are tracking money down to the dollar because they're choosing between groceries and rent. The noise level dropped. Then Megan nodded. That's a perspective we need more of. How do we design for that reality? That function became one of the app's most popular features, especially among younger users, and those on a low budget. The business newsletter featured it as an example of inclusive design. My name was stated directly. I did not email the story to my parents. I didn't take a screenshot of the appreciation and send it to Emily. Didn't even mention it on social media where they might see it. The accomplishment was mine, and I didn't need their approval to make it happen. But I would be lying if I claimed I didn't anticipate Dad reading about it and understanding he was mistaken about me. That daydream would occasionally play on repeat. He called to apologize, and Mom cried about how she had misunderstood me. Emily admitted that she had always knew they were treating me unjustly. Dr. Evans and I also worked on letting go of that fantasy. They may never acknowledge what they did wrong, she told me. Your healing can't depend on them finally seeing clearly. But what if they do? Then you get to decide if their apology is genuine and if you want to accept it, but hoping for it keeps you tethered to their approval. Real freedom comes from not needing it anymore. Not needing their approval. The thought felt as unattainable as flying, but I started working toward it regardless. My career has accelerated. After 1 year, the IT business elevated me to lead designer. I switched firms 18 months later for a senior job at a startup that provided ownership. The firm was bought 14 months later, and my stock options were converted into genuine money, the sort with multiple zeros that made my hands shake when I checked my bank account. But I did not blow it. Megan and I had anticipated windfalls. The money was invested, diversified, and live in my comfortable apartment and drive my safeguarded. I continued 7-year-old Toyota. The only indulgence I gave myself was to start looking at land. I had always admired the concept of spaciousness, of having enough land that no one could peek over your fence and estimate your worth. I spent weekends driving north of the city, looking for sale signs. The majority of properties were either prohibitively pricey or excessively tiny. Then I discovered it. Sonoma County has 40 acres of sloping hills with valley oak trees and a seasonal brook that runs through the eastern section. The land had been on the market for 8 months because it required well and septic construction, which deterred most purchasers. The property included an ancient farmhouse that needed to be completely renovated, as well as other outbuildings in varying levels of disrepair. I did not observe any difficulties, I saw promise. The sellers were an older couple relocating to Arizona to be near their grandchildren. They liked the land but couldn't keep it up. We sat at their kitchen table, having instant coffee, and I made my pitch. 2. They accepted, with tears in the wife's eyes as she expressed her happiness. The property would go to someone who valued it. I paid for the land with cash from my assets, then took out a construction loan for improvements. But I did not hire out everything. Years of studying DIY tutorials and spite-driven dedication meant I could accomplish more than most people expected. I engaged contractors for structural construction, well drilling, and septic systems. Everything else I investigated and learned. I spent every weekend out there ripping out rotten timber and learning how to tile. I restored the original hardwood floors on my hands and knees using a rental sander, painted every wall, and replaced light fixtures and cabinet hardware. The farmhouse gradually turned, room by room, into something magnificent. But the house was only the beginning. I hoped that the property would work for me. I explored agricultural choices and realized that Sonoma County provided ideal conditions for lavender production. The market for lavender goods, essential oils, dried flowers, and culinary lavender continued to increase. Better, lavender required little upkeep once grown and could offer a steady revenue. I planted my first 5 acres of lavender, spent weeks installing irrigation lines and learned about soil pH, and bought bees to aid with pollination, which I realized I like maintaining. I added a small herd of goats since they are great for land management, and I've always desired animals. I built a processing barn so I could dry lavender and extract oils. I opened an internet business and received a license to sell at farmers markets. The learning curve for farming was severe enough to be classified as a cliff. During that first year, everything I thought I knew about hard labor was redefined. I spent my weekends reading agricultural extension guides and watching YouTube videos about lavender growing around 2 a.m. when I was unable to sleep. I joined internet forums where experienced farmers answered my many inquiries, frequently with more tolerance than I deserved. Initially, I was scared of bees. I'd joined up for a beginner beekeeping class at the local extension office, where a weathered farmer called Sam taught 15 of us how to keep hives without becoming anaphylactic. He maintained a zen-like calm around the bees that I couldn't imagine emulating. "Till sense your fear," he stated during our first practical session, putting me in a borrowed suit. "Remain calm, move deliberately, and respect what they're doing." My hands trembled so severely that I could hardly handle the cigarette. But Sam stayed around me, walking me through each step until I had successfully tested my first frame for eggs and honey. When the bees swarmed over my gloved hands, I felt a sense of amazement rather than dread. "You're a natural," Sam observed, and I almost burst into tears at the simple generosity of someone recognizing my ability. I purchased 3 hives, and Sam assisted me in installing them on the site. I gave them silly names like Beyoncé, Dolly, and Cher since I was going to have fun with this. The goats were given similarly ludicrous names: Rambert Downey Jr., Goatsart, and Billy Joel. My property started to seem more like a home than an investment. The physical effort was difficult but rewarding in ways that my IT career never was. I'd spend my mornings on the computer doing design work, followed by afternoons in the fields, my hands in soil and my thoughts blissfully silent. The goats would follow me about like demanding babies, head-butting my legs for attention. The bees hummed a steady tune. The lavender bloomed in beautiful purple rows and smelt amazing. During the first harvest season, I recruited Sophie and Jake, 2 local high school students, to assist pick and wrap lavender. I paid them considerably over the minimum rate and included fresh goat cheese and honey as extras. They worked hard, and I enjoyed watching them find that agricultural labor can be rewarding when done decently. Sophie remarked during a lunch break that she was attempting to save for college, but her parents couldn't assist with the expenses. The echo of my own narrative was so powerful that I nearly flinched. "What do you want to study?" I inquired. "Environmental science. But state schools are expensive and I'm not sure if I'll be able to save enough while also supporting my family." I paused for precisely 3 seconds. "I'll hire you part-time year-round if you want. 15 hours a week, flexible around your school schedule. The work varies by season. Planting, maintenance, harvest, processing. You can save specifically for college. Her expression changed. Seriously? Seriously. You're a good worker, and I need consistent help anyway. Jake. If you're interested, I have the same offer. They both agreed. I taught them everything Sam taught me about land management, beekeeping, and agricultural cultivation. I watched them gain confidence and talents that no classroom could offer. When Sophie received her admission letter to UC Davis the following spring, I offered her a bonus and promised to keep her position available for summer employment. "Why are you doing this?" she said, still clutching the package in her fingers. "Because someone did it for me once," I explained, recalling Mrs. Harris and a $550 check from when I had pneumonia. "And because you deserve to be supported." The farm evolved into more than simply a company or property. It demonstrated that you could create something kind and sustainable. That achievement did not include treading on others or hoarding chances. Every decision I made, I questioned myself, is this what my parents would do, or is this who I actually want to be? I selected differently each time. The second year, the Lavender earnings paid for my property taxes and insurance. The third year included such expenses as well as equipment charges. I wasn't becoming rich, but the farm supported itself as my portfolio grew from my IT work. I could handle the most of the technical work remotely, which allowed me to live on the property full-time and commute to the city only twice a week. I created a life that looked nothing like what my parents cherished, but rather like freedom. During the 2 years of quiet, my family made occasional attempts to communicate. Mom would text me on holidays, asking if I intended to visit. Dad once sent me an email asking whether I was over my tantrum. Emily phoned every few months, her voice stiff with responsibility, asking how I was doing but never truly listening to the answers I didn't provide. I blocked their numbers. I eventually modified my phone settings such that their texts were sent to a place I never examined. On social media, I had them all banned. They knew nothing about my life, achievement, or possessions, and I preferred it that way. Then arrived last Tuesday. I was in the processing barn packaging dried lavender for an online purchase when my phone called with an unknown number. I nearly didn't respond, but something made me pick up. "Hello?" Heavy breathing came through the line, followed by Dad's voice, which shook with something I hadn't heard before. Uncertainty. "Maybe we need to talk." "No, we really don't." My voice sounded flat. Years of treatment have helped me establish boundaries without emotion. "Your sister drove past your property." This paused me. "What?" "She was in Soma for a wine tasting with David, took a wrong turn, and ended up on some rural road. She says she saw your truck in a driveway, a big property with lavender fields and a renovated farmhouse." My gut twisted, but I kept my voice calm. "And is it true? Do you own that land? Why would that matter to you?" Dad's breathing became deeper. Emily looked up the property records. 40 acres, house, barn. She says it must be worth close to $2 million. $2.3 million. I corrected before I could stop myself. I had it appraised last month. The quiet on the other end was so long I assumed he had hung up. "Then how?" "Hard work, smart investing. Everything you said I wasn't capable of. We had no idea you were doing so well. You could have told us." My chuckle was unfunny. "Why would I tell you anything? You called me a failure and funded my sister's life while leaving me to drown in student loans. We thought you needed tough love. We thought if we didn't enable you, you'd find motivation." "Tough love," I repeated, tasting the words as poison. "You gave Emily $100,000 while telling me I'd accomplished nothing. That's not tough love, that's just cruelty." Mom's voice could be heard in the background, as if she was using speakerphone. "We want to see the property. We want to be involved in your life again." "No, you can't keep us out forever," Dad responded. And now I recognized the sharpness in his voice, the usual demand for acquiescence. "We're your parents. You stopped being my parents when you told me I was the family failure. You made your choice. I'm just living with it." "Your sister is very upset," Mom said. "She's been crying all evening. She feels terrible about the house money now that she knows your situation." "My situation?" The lavender bundle in my fingers crushed beneath my hold, releasing its perfume in a purple cloud. "My situation is that I built a life without you, without your money, without your approval, without your presence. I don't need you now. We could help you expand the farm," Dad said, and I could hear him scurrying and recalculating. "We have connections. We could invest. I don't want your investment. I don't want anything from you." Emily's voice came through. She must have been there too. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't know they were treating you so differently. That almost crushed me because it was such a clear falsehood. She had been there. She had seen them disregard me at every step. I took their money despite the fact that I received nothing in return. But I had spent 2 years making armor. You knew exactly what you were doing, you all did. You bet on the wrong daughter, and now you're trying to hedge. That's not fair, Mom said, her voice rising to the pitch she used when she lost control of a story. Neither is giving one daughter everything while telling the other she's worthless. But here we are. So what? You're just never going to speak to us again? Dad demanded after everything we'd done for you growing up. You mean feeding and housing me? That's called basic parenting, not a debt I owe. They were arguing, and I could hear it. Muffled voices are talking over each other. Dad eventually got back on, his voice attempting to be pleasant but ending up sounding desperate. Let's have dinner. Just one dinner. Come to the house. I am being an adult. Adults have boundaries. Adults walk away from people who damage them. Adults build lives that don't include their abusers. Abusers? Mom's cry could be heard even without the phone. We never abused you. You're right. You just systematically destroyed my self-worth while financing my sister's dreams. Totally different. I hung up before they could react and quickly blocked the unknown number. As I hung up the phone, my hands trembled slightly, adrenaline coursing through my body. But behind the trembling, there was something solid. Perhaps certainty, or simply knowing that I had spoken what I needed to say. They attempted many ways to contact me. An email from Dad's work account went directly to spam. A letter was addressed to my property, which I returned unread. Emily showed up to my fence one Saturday morning, but I had already installed the video system and had not opened it. She stood there for 20 minutes, intermittently screaming out my name, before departing. The most difficult aspect was when they attempted employing other relatives. Aunt Linda phoned saying, Mom was heartbroken, and I couldn't just forgive them. Cousin Michael posted a Facebook message that somehow got through, talking about how family was everything and holding grudges was poison. I blocked them all. Anyone who supported my parents without understanding the entire story was not someone I needed in my life. My therapist, Dr. Singh, had been preparing me for this moment since I first saw her 18 months ago. They'll try to reassert control when they realize you don't need them, she remarked in one session. That's when your boundaries will be tested most severely. She wasn't incorrect. But the limits remained. I created them with the same elements as my new life: tenacity, self-esteem, and the unwavering belief that I deserved better than what they had to give. The lavender farm continued to flourish. I planted an additional 10 acres of plants, established a suitable irrigation system, and employed 2 part-time workers during harvest season. We began doing agritourism, inviting small groups for farm tours and lavender picking excursions. My income rapidly increased, to the point that I considered quitting my IT career and going full-time farming. My social life improved as well. I met individuals at the farmers market, including other merchants, who became true friends. I started dating Luke, a man I met at a sustainable agriculture course who bred heritage breed chickens and had bad pecking order jokes. Nothing serious yet, just something warm and simple. Something that did not require me to prove my value in every interaction. 6 months after that phone contact, a box came at my house. Although there was no return address on the label, I recognized Mom's handwriting. Inside, there was a $100,000 check and a message written in her precise script. We should have given you this in college. We apologize. I stared at the check for a long time, sitting at my kitchen table with morning light flowing through the windows I had built myself. $100,000. They gave Emily the correct amount without hesitating. The sum they determined I was not worth. The money has the potential to do a great deal. Pay off the remaining college loans. Create a decent store on the property. Buy the equipment I've been saving for. However, accepting it would include agreeing to their terms and deadline for reconciliation. It would entail admitting that money could repair what they'd shattered. I tore the check into pieces that were too tiny to be put back together. Placed them in an envelope with one sentence written on a sheet of paper. You cannot purchase forgiveness. I sent it back to their address. Dr. Evans smiled when I informed her about it at our following session. How did that feel? Expensive, I agreed. But right. Growth often is. Dad tried again approximately a month after the return check. He showed up at my gate unexpectedly, as if he had decided Emily's ambush technique would be more effective. I saw him on the security camera, standing there in his weekend khakis and polo shirt, appearing older than I recalled. I picked up the intercom. Leave. I just want 5 minutes. Please. You had 26 years. You used them to tell me I wasn't good enough. We're done. I was wrong. His voice broke slightly. And a part of me, still his little girl, craved acceptance and longed to open the gate. But I had worked too hard to let that portion drive any longer. You were. And now you get to live with that just like I had to live with it. Can't we move past this? Can't you forgive us? I can forgive you, I murmured softly, understanding that what I was saying was true. I can forgive you for being flawed parents who played favorites and damaged their daughter. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean letting you back into my life to do more damage. It just means I'm not carrying your mistakes anymore. He stood there for a long time, shoulders down. He then walked back to his car and drove off. I stared until his taillights vanished down the road. That happened 3 months ago. They have not attempted since. Perhaps they have finally understood that certain bridges, once destroyed, cannot be rebuilt. Maybe they tell their pals that I'm ungrateful or unpleasant. Perhaps Emily is still crying at the unfairness of it all during her wine tastings with David in their $100,000 home. I don't know and don't care. That is the freedom I have gained. The skill to stop caring what others think of me. My lavender farm has ended its finest season yet. Revenue surpassed 6 figures for the first time, and estimates for next year appear even more promising. I am collaborating with a tiny cosmetics firm to produce a line of lavender skincare items. Luke and I are discussing about moving in together and even building a second little house on the land. I'll be presenting a session on sustainable agricultural methods next month. Life is nothing like my parents envisioned for either of their daughters, yet it is all I needed it to be. Some days, I still feel that old anguish, wishing I had a family who acknowledged my accomplishments and showed up in my life. But ultimately, I'm grateful for the family I've chosen, friends who genuinely care, a therapist who helps me recover, and a community that appreciates what I create. The Martinez family lost a daughter when they labeled her a failure. They didn't recognize it until she quit wanting their approval and proved them incorrect. By then, I'd already created something they couldn't touch. A life devoted exclusively to me. Purchased not with their money, but with my own effort, tears, and obstinate unwillingness to be the person they claimed I was. Sometimes, at nightfall, I go through my lavender fields, the bees singing and the goats trailing after. And I'm experiencing something I never felt as a child. Peace. The absolute assurance that I am precisely where I should be, doing exactly what I am intended to accomplish. My parents handed Emily $100,000 and referred to it as an investment. They offered me nothing but uncertainty and criticism, calling it inspiration. It turns out they were both mistaken about what I required. They refused to offer me exactly what I needed. The opportunity to fail on my own terms, to suffer without them watching in disappointment, and to construct anything without their fingers on the scale. They intended to abandon me. Instead, they released me. So when people ask me if I'll ever reconcile with my family, I grin and answer, probably not. Because the family that matters isn't the one you were born into, it's the one you construct for yourself. Person by person, decision by choice, and boundary by boundary. And mine has no space for folks who only appreciated me once I no longer needed them.